Hi, folks. This is Don Meisner with the North Country Fishing Report. You know, a couple things I wanted to touch on. One of the biggest disadvantages we have out in the St. Lawrence River is a susceptibility because it's a ocean line. It's an ocean water line, basically. One of the disadvantages is you're always open to invasive species. And one of the most awful invasive species that have ever come into our waters is the goby. And on the flip side of that, it has been wonderful because the gobies have changed the diet of most of our fish, and most of our species have got bigger and bigger because of eating gobies. However, the gobies they're a threat. And if they move into the tributaries, they could really affect the fishing in the Grass River, the Oswegatchie River, the St. Regis River, the Racket River. So have they. I was recently fishing with my buddy Will Clute on the reservation, and I said, Will, are the gobies in here on these tributaries? Because those are the places that he fishes so much this time of the year. And especially the Racket and the St. Regis River, but also the Salmon River, a bit downstream. And he said, no. And I said, why? He says, I don't know if they can't adapt to the turbidity of the water, because any of these tributaries aren't as clear as the St. Lawrence River. But the fact that the gobies are not in there in numbers, hopefully. Now, I could be wrong. I mean, some of you out there fishing may have discovered or caught gobies in the Grass River, because one of the great sections of the Grass River is from where they did the cleanup in Messina all the way downstream to where it empties into the St. Lawrence. Just thousands of walleyes come into that area. And, you know, a lot of fishermen target that area. So have the gobies moved into these waters? Apparently, in most cases, they haven't. And so I think that's going to maintain the unique characteristic that these tributaries have, because they offer, and again, I know I talk about it a lot because I love these tribs, but again, most people, especially from out of the area, don't realize the gem that these waters are. And to go from a gem to an unbright stone, it doesn't take an awful lot to change the whole characteristics, whether it's a virus, whether it's an invasive species. And so hopefully those gobies will stay out. You know, lampreys they're not an invasive species, but they're another species that can wreak havoc. They can destroy a fishery. For years, they almost destroyed the whole fishery on Lake Champlain. And they just devastated the fishing down in Lake Ontario for years. Every fish you caught, you would see lamprey damage on them. So these are things that we need to be aware of, but hopefully the gobies will stay out of our tributaries. The other thing that I wanted to mention is the weed cover. The weed cover in our waters, and especially the waters that are fed by the St. Lawrence River, some of the backwaters that I fish, I've never seen the mats, M-A-T-S, the mats of weeds that are forming this early in the year. And I'm not sure what the reason is, because actually the water level in these backwaters is higher than I've seen at this time of the year before. And yet it's made it almost impossible for me to wade my favorite areas. I haven't seen anything like this in 30 or 40 years. The other thing that came to my mind and was made obvious to me was when I was fishing on the reservation with my buddy Will. We'd move into areas and I'd say, Will, what are you looking for? Because Will can see everything. That water's so clear. And he's got great eyes, and he's looking down. And he says, well, the moss has moved into this area. It wasn't here a week ago, and it's moved in. And when this moss, it's like a slimy, mossy substance on the bottom, moves in, he says, the fish tend to move out of these areas. Even if they had formed beds in these areas, they're over now. They leave and they go out of these areas. And I says, well, what's doing? Why? I wasn't aware of this mossy condition that you're talking about, because it's not up on the top of the water. It's not something that you'd cast and get moss on your bait or anything. It's nothing like that. But it's kind of covering the bottom. And it's a change that takes place that pushes these fish out. And I said, well, what is the reason? he said, I think it's oxygen levels. It changes the amount of oxygen that the fish have in these areas, and it makes it so it's not as comfortable or as attractive for them, and so they move into other areas. And there's just so many things to be aware of when we fish. And the not too often anglers, the anglers that just get a chance to go maybe every weekend or not even that, maybe once or twice a month, they don't get to learn all this stuff as easily as somebody that's out on the water all the time. But some of our better fishermen have become more and more aware of this as information is passed more readily this day and age. And it's something that I never tire of learning more things about our water conditions, and especially being able to pass it on to all of you. Until next time, folks, this is Don Meisner with the North Country Fishing Report.